everybody. We are live in Innovation Alley on the Innovation Alley podcast. Today
Once again
is our host, Mike Legary, myself, Chris Johnson, and we're greeted once again by a frequent guest here, Kerry Stevenson, who wears a lot of different hats. Kerry is a volunteer in the community. Kerry is an expert and one of the foremost publishers on 3D printing, probably in the world. But today, you're going to put the specific hat on of a guy who just got back from CES for the nth time.
Yes, I'm tired.
Yeah. So today, what we're going to cover with you, Kerry, we're going to suck your brain dry of all the different things. So everybody blogs about like the top 5 things you saw at CES. We're not doing that. Everybody wants to figure out
because they're lying.
Right.
No one. When I got back, I computed how much of the show I actually saw, and I missed 97.3% of it.
That sounds precise. Right. So everybody talks about that. So let's get into it from a startup perspective. I'm in Winnipeg, and I'm building something crazy cool this year. How do I become the guy or the guys or the company that gets some sort of notice at CES? So in other words, if I'm going to go to CES next year, we want to suck out of your brain some of the learnings you've taken in and how we might go through that adventure.
Fair enough.
So,
well, the first thing you got to know is this event is absolutely gigantic. There was 175,000 attendees this year.
Wow. And
it's spread over, like 20 different venues, each of which is like ginormous. And it takes like an hour to get between the venues if you want to travel around. So anybody going there can only see a very, very small fraction of the thing. And if you're wanting to show off your thing, you have to somehow get the people that are going to see that small fraction be your percentage. That's tough.
So with all of the different buildings that exist, so you're talking like, I might go to one casino convention center and there'd be some stuff, and then I go to another.
Yeah, I think the event started at the convention center and overflowed that, and then it started going to other neighboring places, and now it covers, I don't know, like a dozen different places, and they're all absolutely massive. Every single one of them you wouldn't be able to finish in 4 days alone.
So that concept of pre-marketing is absolutely key thing. So I find a lot of startups, you end up going to like one show, there's a couple thousand people, it's one floor of a place. It's pretty easy to sucker related clients in when they're all at one location versus
there's
you're
a couple
talking
things to do.
Multiple places. If they don't know you're there, they may never find you.
Well, I go there to cover 3D printing, and years ago what was happening was the vendors that were exhibiting that stuff were just sort of randomly sprinkled over the whole place, and it was horrendous to actually go to see them. So what happens at that show when there's a lot of any particular topic is they create a zone. And so I was hanging out at the 3D print zone, which was right beside the fitness zone. And on the other side, there was some kind of IoT thing. And, there's like a camera zone. And there's all these different zones. And if you're interested in a topic as a media person or a buyer or whatever, you will go to that area. And, of course, there's a very strong implication there. If you're exhibiting, say, a fitness gadget, you absolutely have to be in the fitness zone. Otherwise, no one is going to see you. And that's really, really tough.
So it's not one of these things where I can just go on the website and you wouldn't maybe suggest, because what I do, I think I'd rather be at a show than not be there, because at least you're sort of around.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck in that position where maybe you miss the gate or it's sort of too close to the show, but you can get a spot, for the cost, is it worth even doing that? Or is it worth just going and walking around?
I bumped into vendors who were unfortunately out of the right zone. They were kind of randomly spotted. And I'd ask them, like, how's the show going for you? And they would almost always say, it's terrific. We're getting so much traffic and all this. There's rivers of people everywhere. And you're going to hit that pile of people no matter what. But to get better odds, you want to be in the right zone because there's better people in that zone, of course. Now, the problem is, how do you get those people to come visit you if you aren't in the right zone? And I found that a lot of the vendors would hire a PR firm. And what they would do is gain access to the mailing list for all the press people. And then they would, start working it and inviting people.
Yeah.
Right. So as a media person, that was my role there. It was actually kind of ugly because in the days leading up, I was getting like a message every minute from some PR lady. And it was really tough to filter through. But I did look at them, and I filtered out the ones I wasn't interested in to focus on the ones that I had. It's like,
so it is effective. Like you as a blogger actually went through, a couple hundred of those a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's easy to throw them away. But the ones that you see, that's something I want to see, and it's in a weird place. So then I would alter my schedule to actually get over there at some point during the show. So if you're stranded out somewhere else, not that big a deal. The other geographic issue is related to cost. The cost of a piece of the floor there is just stupid expensive.
So what's that, like 10 by 10 booth is sort of that standard?
I think I heard like $8,000 or something like that. And
So
by the way, that
basically
just gets you the bare concrete. Like
Right. Yeah.
you want carpet.
So that's
you
2
want
to
a
3
display?
times more than you might see at an industry show of other flavors.
Right. It's very expensive,
Right.
and even though it's expensive, you'd still see some companies with absolutely horrendously gigantic. Like in fact, the Panasonic booth was. Well, it was called the Panasonic Stadium because it was the size of a stadium. I don't know what they paid for it. It was literally millions and millions of dollars for this thing. But there's the big players like that, but then there's the little players, the startups, and a lot of times startups can't afford.
To be fair,
that.
yesterday when we talked about this, you called that the ghetto.
I
you
did.
showed me on a
I
picture
did.
a map, and it was like pimples across the side of a mountain.
Yeah. If you look at the floor map, you'll see these sort of average-sized booths, and then there's one area. It's called the Eureka Zone, I think they call it.
Eureka Zone.
It's
That
basically
sounds more politically
it's
correct.
the startup ghetto, and it's tiny little booths. I don't know, they're like 6x6 or something like that. I guess they're slightly reduced cost, and they're on one particular floor, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of, well, actually thousands. There was thousands of booths, and I strolled through there a few times, and it was very difficult to see anything. Like you had to keep your eyes open because it wasn't organized particularly well by topic. So you'd be walking along and, there's a smart light bulb, and there's a weird 3D printer, and there's some kind of cloud service, and there's a self-propelled luggage or something, all beside each other, and it just goes on like that endlessly, row after row after row.
So who was memorable and why? Like what in that startup space? What were people doing to differentiate, and what was working?
Well, you'd see every trick in the book. You'd see people handing out, free samples of something, or food, was another good one. You'd actually see booth babes. There's some companies are
That's
still doing
still a
that.
thing, hey?
Yeah, sometimes.
I haven't been called that in years, mind you.
Well, the thing is, when you're there, there's so much to see that you're actually trying to keep a velocity going as you're walking around because you're afraid you're going to miss something. So it's not like you're going to stop and think about anything. It has to be instantaneously recognizable what it is, so that you can qualify whether you want to talk to these people or not.
Are you looking at the product when you walk by and making that assumption or calculation yourself? Or are you reading the top 10 words on their banner? Like, how
Yes.
do you get there?
I look at the banner, or I look at the visible thing that they have.
So that's the order of operations.
You have to make an instantaneous decision about whether this is something to think about or not. And if not, you just keep going. And I'm sorry, I'm disappointed. I don't know how many people just walking right by them. And a lot of times they were saying, "Oh, hey, can we talk to you about?" And I'm gone. But you have to do that because there's just so many people there and so many things to see. So anyway, one thing that does seem to work is unusual costumes or people doing things. It sounds kind of silly, but like at one point I saw a guy in this green outfit, like head to toe. I think I showed you a picture of that.
Like spandex sort of get
Yeah,
up.
and it's like it had nothing to do with the product, but it somehow caught your eye, and it made you look a little bit longer at their sign, and things like that may work. I'd see people dressed up as like animals or something. That seemed to work. Seems completely stupid, but those are the kind of tactics you have to execute in that kind of hugely
So
competitive
it's never
environment.
too soon for a startup to start thinking about a mascot.
That's true. That's true.
That's a horrible
In fact,
idea.
well,
Horrible idea, people. Horrible idea.
I saw some in the 3D area. Like, I was talking to one CEO, and he was lamenting all the trouble they had to go get this mascot costume made, with some sort of robot thing. But, they did that. And, I'd see people in unusual outfits, and it seems to work.
So so putting your media blogger person hat back on, are people sending samples to you in advance, or is it pretty much just you're getting media releases
It's just media releases. It'll be like
Okay.
a press release. Maybe they'll say there's a product. Maybe they'll say in advance, we're going to announce this thing on the 7th. Here's all the details. It's under embargo until then. Don't publish anything. And that's actually very helpful for the media because they can, write up the story leisurely in advance and then not worry about it on the day.
Right.
Because who knows what else is happening on that day, and you may not actually get to it.
So
that's
So
very,
for
very
non-media,
helpful.
non-writer person, what is embargoed? Like, what is it, and how do you
Basically,
use
it says, we're giving you the press release on the 1st
Yeah.
that is actually going to be publicly released on the 7th, and you are able to see it, but you cannot publish anything until the official release date.
Now, is there anything legal about that when you say it's embargoed? Is it? Are you just trusting them?
Sometimes
or-
companies will have an NDA, but that seems to be very rare.
Yeah.
Usually it's like, just don't do
it's
it.
a credibility thing. I mean, you'd blow your credibility if you
Well, I
blew an
did.
embargo.
I did once. They sent me this thing, and it was like the like the 6th or the 7th, and at a certain time, and I reversed the digits on the embargo date, so I had it one day early, and so they said, "Hey, you shouldn't be publishing." Oh, so I just fixed it up, and that was okay because that happens now and then.
So let me ask you this: there's rivers of people, as
Yeah.
you've described, walking through. This is the Consumer Electronics Show, CES.
Well, the
It used to
C
be.
has become small C.
Right, fair. So there's these rivers of people. How would you break it up demographically for a startup? So is it 50% people off the street? Is it 50% media? What are the percentages of the type of people who are walking around?
Oh, there's probably 10% media. I would think
That's
there's
significant.
A huge amount of media.
Like that by your numbers, that's
Hey,
like almost 20,000
they're giving
media.
you free lunch and everything there, like every day. Like it was, literally, they were serving breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. They gave you free Wi-Fi and everything, just to attract the media. Yeah. So there's a lot of media, but the rest of the people, there's nobody off the street. Yeah. There's no kids. There's no mums with backpacks or anything like that. It's just buyers and other industry people. And that's what their name tags all say. You know if somebody's a buyer, if somebody's like a reporter or whatever, just by looking at their badge.
So just starting to wrap up here. If from a startup perspective, if I want to go to the show, under what circumstances should I do that? If I'm pre-prototype, post-prototype, pre-investment, post-investment. There's a lot of folks who go there with a prototype expecting to meet the next big venture capitalist that's going to get them over the mark. But in all seriousness, if you're a startup, when would you recommend a startup invest in going to CES?
It depends on your circumstances. So, for example, I saw some guys there that had this thing, and it was a prototype. It was totally rough, but they were just showing the technology, and they were there in an attempt to recruit investors or get some kind of buzz about what they're doing. That was their purpose. On the other hand, you'd also see people, they have a finished product, and they just want to find buyers from retail stores that want to buy quantities of them. And you'd also see people that are just in between, where they have the product, it's not quite announced, not out there, but we're going to show it off anyway. So those are the three kinds of things that I saw there. So it depends what you want to do and how big. The guys who were looking for investment, they had a project that they needed a lot of money for. So they go to a place where they find people with lots of money.
Fair enough. So Kerry,
there's one other technique I wanted to say.
Yes.
You can actually go to this thing and not have a booth. And so I've seen this at other trade shows where, if you just can't afford it, but to have a booth, but you can afford to attend, like with the flight and the ticket to get into the thing, you wear the T-shirt, you have the product in a backpack, and you just walk around with a big wad of business cards, and people will stop you and say, what is that thing? And they'll just assume you have a booth somewhere else, even though you don't.
Yeah.
And then you
guerrilla style.
Yeah, totally guerrilla style. And that's totally valid to do. I've seen that. There was lots of people I met there that didn't have booths. One of the big ones we met with was MakerBot, and they canceled their booth because they didn't feel it was worth it. But they were still there. I talked to their CEO, and there's people floating around. So that's another technique.
Great. Well, listen, Kerry, this was a lot of fun. I think we should we'll continue to talk more about what you saw at CES and learn more. But thanks for the sharings today. Let's plug Fabbaloo. So Fabbaloo 3D printing blog. Where do people find you?
It's at fabbaloo.com. FABALLOO.com.
Just Google it.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't got it after 8 years here. But yeah, so we write daily news on 3D printing, and we have lots of exclusive stories, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the time today, Mike. It was a good time. We learned a bunch from our friend Kerry.
Tons. I know. I guess going to CES next year.
Well, yeah, we should do a road trip for the podcast live from the Vegas Strip for CES.
That'll cost you.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot.